predominantly for a train delay. And Councillor Lloyd, I believe, is now online. So online we have Councillor Joanna Kane from Worcestershire and Gavin Lloyd from Coventry, and we have 3 councillors in the room. Therefore, we are not quorate. I do apologise to the officers for the delay and for the non-attendance of some of the people. Some of that, I think, is due to the fact that people have changed over councillors at their annual meetings, and the new councillors were supposed to start in June, but the old councillors dropped off early. That looks what appears to have happened. So yeah, that's unfortunate. Right. So would you like to just go through the apologies? Because we do have quite a few. Thank you, Janet.
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillor Philip Bateman, Councillor Kathy Baton, Councillor Diane Donaldson, Councillor Ellen Fenton, Councillor Ewan Mackey, and Councillor Jamie Turn.
Thank you for that. On Chair's remarks, I've only got one remark, I think. I've asked for a quick presentation on the emerging spatial strategy, which is going to the board on, I think it's June the something or other, is it?
Potentially.
Potentially. And I thought we ought to have a quick look at it first, as it is going to the board. Spatial strategy is really about long-term strategic planning. And it, as I was joking with Councillor Waters beforehand, it's about, do we put the new oil refinery in the Walsall Green Belt? But it is at that huge strategic level rather than detailed planning level. So, and as I understand it, this is the very early stages of that strategy. So hopefully we will get early input all the way through the process, and because it will affect each of the boroughs slightly differently. So thank you for that. Minutes of the last meeting, we can't approve them, can we? Except that if anybody has got any comments on them, that would be helpful. Otherwise, I'll take them as read. No comments. So we pass those to the board, don't we, technically? Yeah.
You want me to just?
Yeah, I perhaps would say just for members who are here and on Teams, you correctly referenced the meetings in quorum. So there's a scrutiny committee can't make any formal recommendations to the WMCA board or elsewhere. But I think given that the nature of the items on the agenda, it's useful if you have these presentations and questions for information. But just to clarify that you're being in quorum, you're not able to make any formal recommendations.
Thank you for that. So we move on to our first substantive item, Peter, which is the West Midlands Place Pilots Programme. And I assume everybody's read the papers, but if you could give us a summary and what you think are the key learning lessons for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this is a paper which we're bringing forward, which goes through the lessons learned from our Place Pilots programme, which concluded in March of this year. So this is really an update from the paper that's brought to the Scrutiny Committee about last year, which was about halfway through the programme. So we've now concluded the programme and have a number of outputs and lessons learned from it. So just a quick overview of what the programme is or was. So it was a Cabinet Office initiative delivered through One Public Estates. There were a number of place pilots throughout the country. West Midlands was the biggest in terms of its population and geography, and we received a revenue grant of 500k from Cabinet Office to really pilot various projects throughout the region that took forward some of the principles of One Public Estate. So it's all about co-location, relocation, land assembly, and kind of that strategic thinking, working cross-collaboratively with partners right across the public sector in the region to deliver some of those outputs that can be enabled from closer working. So we had a programme manager that was drafted in from Appleson Young to manage the programme. And one of the first things we had to do actually was write to Cabinet Office and get the programme extended by 9 months. You know, their original ambition for the programme was extremely tight in terms of timescale, and it would have been quite unlikely we would have been able to deliver much within that very short timescale. So we're very glad they agreed to that extension to take us to the end of the financial year. We selected 4 projects for funding, a shared asset strategy in the city of Wolverhampton. So that was working collaboratively with all public sector landowners within Wolverhampton, very much led by Wolverhampton City Council, really as a key driver of that project in taking that forward. Looking at locality infrastructure partnerships in the Birmingham Solihull ITB area, looking at collaborative delivery for health and social care within one of the ICB6 localities, strategic planning for public transport services, so working with TfWM, looking specifically at 2 park and ride sites and Palmetto bus station to look at opportunities for collaboration, and working with Solihull Metropolitan Borough Council to reimagine service delivery models. So very much looking at opportunities that the council can collaborate with partners across their area and the voluntary social sector as it looked to transform its service delivery. So there are a number of key outputs which are in the report pack, which you can have a read through, but I'm just going to touch on some of the benefits from the pilot overall. So I think one of the biggest outcomes from this was about kind of forging new relationships. The One Public Estate programme itself had been in situ for quite a number of years now, and it's kind of had become a little bit, you know, very much bread and butter. It kind of morphed somewhat into, you know, bidding for Brownfield Land Release Fund monies through that programme and taking forward individual projects. And it, you know, the OP programme itself had kind of lost some of its relationship working. Actually, the Place Pilot programme has allowed us to build on those existing relationships and build new relationships going forward. So we've got, for example, a Place Forum, which is now set up with all public landowners across the region, and we get together on a quarterly basis and talk through strategic land issues. And we brought new public sector organisations into that relationship, into that forum. So we're much more aware of what everybody is doing and how we can add value through those relationships. And when we're you know, talking about combined projects, for example, we've got much strengthened relationships with both the Cabinet Office and the LGA through the programme. So myself, Chris and my team continue, even though the Place Pilot programme is finished. We still have a fortnightly catch up with colleagues over at Cabinet Office through Office of Government Property. So we've got that continuous link going into OGP and what's going on in the world of central government property, which can often be a little bit mysterious at times. We're trying to kind of forge that appetite for further collaborative work and innovation. You know, there are a number of lessons that came out from the programme. Those are listed in 4.12 of the report. I think timescales still continue to be quite a challenge at times. You know, some of these projects are quite complex, and we had a fairly short timescale to deliver them in. We need to ensure that we had a really good programme management from day one. That was aligned at the beginning of the programme, and it took us a little while to kind of get going with the programme and bring forward those projects earlier. One of the big problems we found was actually getting data out of partner organisations, and actually less so within you know, our own organisation and our council partners. One of the biggest issues was actually getting data out of central government around their property portfolio. And you know, one of the lessons learned that we fed back to Cabinet Office is they need to ensure that their departments are actually being very forthright in bringing forward their data. It's still very much kept behind closed doors at the moment, and we need to have that data available to us to actually make meaningful progress. We had a number of significant projects underway at the same time, and call on partner resources was fairly tight. We're all very, very stretched in terms of resources at the moment, particularly within our local authorities, and it was quite challenging at times to bring forward some of those projects at pace because of the number that were going on all at the same time, because of the tight timescales we were delivering in. And we would also say that we would encourage both the consultants that we employed to run some of these pilots and our partners to just think a little bit more strategically beyond the confines of those assets and how it kind of might support with some wider initiatives and master plans. But overall, it's been a very good project. You can see the lessons learned going forward. We've got a number of next steps that are coming out of the programme now that it's concluded. Sadly, there is no additional funding forthcoming from Cabinet Office at the moment in terms of a further programme, although we have been told that subject to what comes out of the comprehensive spending review next month, there could be a further programme that comes forward, but that cannot be confirmed at the moment. So really, in terms of taking forward any future projects, we're going to be reliant on existing funding within the system, particularly from partners. But we are bringing forward a consolidated action plan to identify any further actions we can take as a CA. Some of those things include updating the public land charter, and that was launched back in 2021, I think. So we're updating the public land charter and using that as a mechanism for making sure that we're all aligned in terms of our purpose across the region, and we're going to be speaking with our partners to get buy-in to ensure that it's updated and everybody is aligned to that. Reviewing our governance framework on how we work within the sector, both in terms of reference and membership around the Place Forum, for example, and continuing to look at options with our own portfolio and how we can better work with partners and adjacent public sector landowners to ensure that we're leveraging monies through integrated settlement and other funds to realise opportunities. So that's a summary of the programme to date. Chris, I don't know if you've got anything you want to add or whether you want to go straight to questions.
I think just to sort of add on the point around leveraging integrated settlement funding, obviously with integrated settlement funding, we have flexibility to sort of tap into that funding. But I think being able to sort of have place pilot projects sort of as a priority in terms of the future and going forward. And again, I would like to invite councillors, and obviously if you could utilise your good officers to lobby on our behalf in terms of how we can utilise some of that IS funding to deliver some of the place pilot projects, and obviously ensure that we maintain that momentum that has been built with partners going forward. And also just to add that we will be having a celebration event with Cabinet Office and other all regional partners on the 3rd of July. So if any councillors would like to sort of join us, that would be great as well. That's it. That's it from me, Pete. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, questions?
Yes.
Well, I've got a couple. Do we now have a register of all the publicly owned building sites across the West Midlands, or if not a totally comprehensive one, a lot better one? Was that one of the results we got out of this? At least we know where the buildings are.
Yes and no. So one of the projects was in Wolverhampton was the shared asset strategy. So with Wolverhampton, we have got an extremely comprehensive, they're actually calling it a comprehensive asset register or CAR. So we know everything in Wolverhampton right across the estate, from central government organisations through to all of our public sector and local government partners within Wolverhampton. So yes, in Wolverhampton, not across the entire region, and that is one thing that we want to continue to work on. I think we can take a lot of learning from the Wolverhampton pilots in particular around how valuable it was creating that comprehensive asset register. So that is one thing that as an organisation we'd like to lead on.
Waters.
Observation rather than a question. I know we have actually got Larry Moore's committees put together, and I'll have a word with Adrian Andrew, who's the portfolio of that, to actually get that across to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ditto from Dudley, we have one some years ago of all assets and portfolio of all assets, and it should be available. I think all actually.
Again, thank you, councillor. Appreciate that. Is that in both of those instances? Is that just what the local authority own, or is it all of the organisations across the area? All organisations. Okay, that's really useful to know. We can definitely build on that then.
That is local authority internally. What the list I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I think that's helpful. And in terms of the forum you've set up, that includes representatives of all the key government agencies, local authority agencies, quangos, you name it. That's the body we're talking about, is it?
Yeah, that's correct. It's a really comprehensive list. So it's ourselves, all of our local authority partners, NHS, various quangos, Homes England. The list goes on really, doesn't it, Chris?
Yeah, we've got Network Rail, Environment Agency, yeah. So
It sounds like an excellent piece of work. I mean, I have no doubt we've got redundant offices all over the place. I mean, individual offices as opposed to blocks, but so consolidation could save the public sector a lot of money.
It has okay. If I could make a comment on that, once again, we have the prospect of writing the multiple sources of funding once again. So we're running out of money here, and then it's apply somewhere else. I understand we got one budget now, and it all came in, but it came out last week, didn't it? That we got an article. What did they admit to having? That's 13 sources of income last week. Then between 11 and 13 sources of income. And you said there was, you're running out of money. You had £500,000.
Yeah. So oh, my microphone's gone off for some reason. Yeah. So yeah, in terms of that £500,000 was direct revenue funding from Cabinet Office for the programme. So that was revenue funding that enabled us to really get consultants in to run all of these projects. That funding was time limited to the 31st of March. That's all been spent. There is no further funding at the moment coming forward in terms of running other programmes. So any revenue funding will have to be sourced from within existing CA or local authority budgets is what we're saying. That said, we've been told that there's an opportunity potentially that some money might come out of Cabinet Office again once the comprehensive spending review is complete, but that's anyone's guess at the moment.
Do we actually need to use consultants?
Yeah, so going forward, there's potentially we could do some of this work internally if we're resourced to do it, but certainly in terms of the existing projects, there was an expectation both from Cabinet Office that we would need to use consultants, and given that the projects themselves were fairly meaty and fairly time limited, we needed that external support to really ensure that we were delivering the outcomes from them.
I'm happy to go in, Councillor Burrow, if you want. Or Louise.
Louise, then
Yeah, I think it was me who mentioned that number, Councillor. It was over 30 different sources. That's 30 different.
30, not 13.
Yeah, 30. Yeah.
Wow.
But this is a specific project that's got a start and an end, and it was a specific amount of money to fund that project to go ahead, if that makes sense.
Councillor Burrow.
and my understanding is we're in a kind of transition year at the moment as well, where we've partly got integrated settlement and partly got hangover grants from umpteen different sources. That's right, is it? So in 26, 27, it's will be a shorter number of funding sources.
Yeah, absolutely. Will be a shorter list of different sources of funding. So this year is kind of a transition year. It's a 1-year settlement, and then in 26, 27 it becomes a multi-year settlement, and more funding gets rolled into the overall integrated settlement, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, how do you have to wait for the money when you apply for the money?
So in this specific case, the one public estate, there was an application went in for the funding some time ago. I think it was probably maybe 5 years plus ago. So this is just for a specific project.
You know,
I think we just sort of take a step back and look at the big picture here. I think it probably helps. Then we'll come back to this specific project. So the big picture is that since 2016, the way in which the combined authority has been funded has been largely, majority has been through individual government departments giving the combined authority specific grants for specific purposes. And actually, I think it runs to about 90 different grants we've been given over that time for different purposes. Exactly. But this is the way the government has chosen to operate. And so we have had to receive each individual grant with its terms and conditions, and then try to spend it according to a timeline that the government department has dictated to us. So in this particular scheme, the Place Pilot scheme, Cabinet Office randomly decided, primarily because there was a director there who thought this would be a good idea, to allocate to a small number of combined authorities £500,000. I think he had it left over at the end of a budget, in order to do this piece of work that Peter has diligently done with colleagues around one public estate. And it had a limited time frame, and we had to spend that money in a particular way. Because of the limited time frame, we couldn't start appointing staff to do that properly. We couldn't start, building our own capacity to do it. So the way you have to do it, because you've only got a limited time to spend it, is get consultancy to do it. So we give all the capacity to the consultants. They are the ones that build up the capacity, and then we end up with these projects that Peter has quite rightly reported on today. We have consistently said to government, this is no way to treat a serious regional body led by democratic authorities, led by the mayor. We need a better way in which to fund mayoral combined authorities. And so they have started to make that transition with this thing called the integrated settlement. And you're quite right, Louise is quite right, that we are in the first year of that, and they've done that for about 20 different grants out of the 90, and now coming together in this year to be able to be a bit more strategic about the way in which we're going to fund things. We are currently now negotiating what's called the multi-year integrated settlement, which will be from April 26 onwards for 2 or 3 years, and we'll have even more flexibility to spend that particular funding. So that's great, but the downside of that is all of these individual grant programs, including the one that Peter's talking about here, will now not be funded. And the expectation from departments like Cabinet Office is, oh, well, you get the integrated settlement, you can just find the funding from the integrated settlement. But the problem is you've got 40 or 50 different grant programs that are all saying, well, we're not going to fund that anymore, you can get it from the integrated settlement. And yet we've only got 20 or 30 grant fund streams going into the integrated settlement. So what we're going to find is there will be huge pressure on the multi-year integrated settlement to try and do all the things that have been individually grant funded now through a smaller integrated settlement. So that's the big challenge that we're going to have over the course of the next 12 months. But I hope that explains the situation and the particular programme that Peter's referred to.
But at the end of the day, we can say no to central government. This is what we're going to do with our money. You might want to do that nationally. If you want to do it nationally, we're happy to be a pilot and give us some more money. I assume that will be our approach. Otherwise, it will be up to the mayor and the board to decide on the priorities. There's always a bit of negotiation, though, I understand. But there's a shift in power over what gets done. to more local, but it's not going to be totally locally determined because these things never are. Have I got that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We will be able to decide how we want to spend the multi-year integrated settlement. But the difficulty, as I say, is there will be many, many competing priorities, and things like Peter's work on one public estate will be one of many things that through the integrated settlement will be saying, well, should we or shouldn't we continue to fund that? But it does give us that freedom to be able to do that.
Does that help?
Oh, yes.
I have one. I have one final question. In pounds, shillings, and pence terms, can we prove that spending £500,000 actually yielded any pounds, shillings, and pence of benefit in terms of we've managed to free up some office space that has gone somewhere else or save some rent or something, or the prospect of that happening? I understand it's not as quick in implementation as one might hope.
Yeah, I don't think we can quantify it in pounds, shillings, and pence today. I think it's opened up a number of discussions that will lead to such things that we're talking about. So we could probably do that at a later stage, but today, no, we can't quantify it in those terms. It's been very much about building those relationships to enable future projects to happen. So,
because I think if we can get to that point, and you can prove that £500,000 saved £1 million,
Yeah.
then your chances of getting more money will be enhanced. I.e. the combined authority funding it. But I do appreciate it. Office moves take an inordinate amount of time, even when you've got agreement done. So the chances of it happening in this very short time scale are limited. I understand that.
Absolutely. I think probably a bit to add on to that as well is we were one of 4 pilots. Chris, is it 4 or 5? 4 pilots. 5 throughout the country. I said we were the largest in terms of geography and population. You've got others that were working on much smaller geographies. So, for example, there were a couple of authorities in the northeast of London working together. Derbyshire, just as a kind of county geography. So we were the largest. So we've got all these various pilots going on throughout the country. What Cabinet Office are now doing is consolidating all of the lessons learned from all 5 of those pilots, and we'll get visibility of that in due course once Cabinet Office have finished compiling their report. So again, we'll be able to take some learning from those other pilots as well and apply that to how we apply for future funding and any other opportunities that might come forward. And again, whether they want to roll this out then more nationally or not.
Thank you for that. I think our only suggestion, therefore, is you get some numbers around this as quick as you are able to. And I'm always happy to receive an information paper when you get to that point. If this does work, then it's something that all 7 boroughs should get involved in the future. Thank you. Ed, please.
On the Commonwealth Games Legacy Enhancement
Yes.
Fund, Janet, do you have the presentation? So just to remind everybody, after the Commonwealth Games in 2022, there was an unspent contingency for the Games that we successfully persuaded DCMS and government to release to the region. It was to the tune of about £70 million, and we were then able to decide here in the region as to how we wanted to spend that funding. I'll be frank, I remember it very well. It was a bit of a bun fight because there were all kinds of people who felt that they had a legitimate reason and interest in that contingency funding. And to make things even more challenging, the DCMS said all the money had to be spent by March 2025. So basically from July 23 to March 25, we had to spend £70 million in a coherent and meaningful way that would bring additional legacy benefits to the region. I'm delighted to say that we've just had this externally evaluated, and it would very much suggest that we have done an incredibly good job in being able to spend that money effectively. And what I want to do in this presentation is to very quickly take you through some of the headlines as to how that money has been spent and some of the benefits that it has delivered. And as I say, much of this has now been independently verified by external evaluators. So this first slide simply reminds us of the 4 buckets in which we put some of the £70 million, in fact, all of the £70 million. So there was something about economy, trade and tourism, inclusive communities, culture and heritage, and then well-being and sustainability. That was the way in which we divvied up the money. And Jan, if you want to go on to the next slide, we decided to spend the money through a variety of different funding mechanisms. Sorry, this is a little bit small, but I can tell you what the different colours denote. So 45% of the funding was awarded to local authorities, so it's kind of double devolved to local authorities. 19%, the yellow bit, was given out in grants to small voluntary and community organisations. The green one is where it was given to delivery partners, two in particular, the West Midlands Growth Company being one of those, and the United by 22 organisation was the second. I'll come back to all of these in just a minute. And then 5% was delivered through market procurement, where we went out to the market and people bid to run things for us. So that's broadly how the money was spent. If we go on to the next slide. So I'm now going to kind of go through many of these different programmes. The way we've categorised them is now according to the Mayor Richard Parker's priorities, because it's easier to do that rather than necessarily in the buckets, and it speaks more meaningfully to the agenda that we're working to now. And again, you'll see there's lots of data on these slides. I'm sure, Councillor Burrow, you won't want me to bore everybody by going through every single number in this pack, but we can share the pack with you. You've got all the data in your report, but frankly, it looks quite boring in the report, whereas here it looks slightly more exciting. So I will share the pack, and you can read it for light relief over the board report. So on the growth for everyone category, we did a lot of work supporting business and investment, particularly through the Global West Midlands programme, which was through West Midlands Growth Company. We landed 133 inward investment projects, which has either created or safeguarded 9,400 jobs, brought in 17 business conferences and 11 major events. And just aside from this, Birmingham, and I know the data is only collected by big cities, it's not collected at a regional level, but Birmingham was the second most successful city outside London for generating FDI projects over the past 12 months, as indicated by EY. So this really was a huge boost and a huge legacy from the Commonwealth Games. As you can imagine, having the Commonwealth Games beamed all around the world, it did generate a lot of inward investment enthusiasm for the region on the back of that. We also put funding into 2 particular programmes to support high growth businesses. So the High Growth Accelerator worked with 50 businesses that leveraged in an additional 5.1 million by those businesses and generated £11 million worth of new sales, 71 jobs. And then a programme called the Supply Chain Transition Programme worked with 120 businesses in order to help them expand their customer bases and their supply chains. And that one's been so successful that we've decided to continue to fund that out of investment zone funding that's now coming to the region. So really quite a big economic impact there. On the next slide, we talk about a different part of the economy, if you like, the social economy. And what we did there in the social economy programme was put funding into a specialised business support programme for social enterprises in the region. 115 were supported, and we've done some quite detailed feedback. There's a separate evaluation report here, and all of those businesses or in total, those businesses saw a 48% increase in their trading opportunities or their trading income thanks to that programme. We've also formed 9 social economy clusters now in different neighbourhoods around the region. I think there are clusters now in Dudley and in Walsall, and I know most of the local authorities have now got a particular cluster where the social economy businesses are all working together. A number of the programmes undertook what's called a social value assessment, where they looked at how much social value is being generated from this investment. The one that did that the best was the United by 22 programme, and they identified 2.7 million pounds worth of social value, thanks to voluntary organisations being able to do additional activity. And I'll come back to some of the things that United by 2022 did, but this social value assessment was really important as well. You want to move on, please, Jana? So the next area to talk about is jobs and skills and well-being and also cultural support. So most of this funding was double devolved to local authorities, although there was a kind of suite of interventions that local authorities could then draw on. For example, to provide targeted job support. So 2,859 people accessed that targeted job support and led them into all kinds of job searching and other activities to help them find jobs. 5,531 young people got career support, and that's led to over 1,000 of them going into education and training. 125 people got paid work placements, and this for me is really important. 18 of those then got full-time employment on the back of that, and 550 young people benefited from mentoring support, and 396 of them remained in education and training as a result of that. So some really important work that's been done to help individuals into jobs and training. There was a particular scheme on cultural sector support. I won't go through all the stats on that one, but again, we know that this is a really growing and important area of the economy. So to, for example, provide boot camps for theatre technicians, VR, a number of internships as well. It was a really, really important part of the whole programme. And also 70 development grants were given to freelancers to help them build their creative industries, businesses in the region. So let's move on to the next one. It's more stuff on jobs, though, particularly on volunteering. So as you might imagine, there was lots and lots of volunteering, both as part of the Commonwealth Games, and we wanted to make sure that those people who had put themselves forward as volunteers had plenty of opportunities to take that forward once the Games was over. So United by 22 mobilised some of the programmes that they'd already been running for young people in particular in order to allow them to keep volunteering in different ways at a range of different events and so on. Particularly young people who had, if you like, barriers to opportunity. So people with special educational needs, young carers, young people with perhaps a criminal record or something like that. And 546 young people have been involved in that kind of activity. Over 22,000 hours worth of volunteering activity for those young people. And there's also been what's called the Volunteers Collective. This is for volunteers generally, 2,306 different volunteering placements since the Games, 24,000 hours of volunteering since the Games, and all of that has got a kind of upskilling element to it. So you're not only volunteering, you're also building your skills so you can go on into jobs and employment. If you want to move on to the next slide, please, Jana. A lot of that volunteering was actually through a whole set of events that have followed on from the Commonwealth Games. So we put £6 million into a whole number of follow-on Commonwealth Games events, things like the Kabaddi World Cup we just had in Wolverhampton, esports events, Godiva Festival in Coventry, a whole range of different events. And those young people and those wider volunteers were were part of putting on those events. Those events have generated £10 million worth of direct economic impact and £4.6 million pounds of GVA impact. So for every £1 spent, we've got at least £2 worth of economic impact for those major events. And just to be clear, the events were decided by and organised by a small advisory group made up of local councillors from around the region to choose where they should go. We also put quite a lot of funding into local authority grants, so local events that were run by local authorities for cultural activity events and festivals, which reached 56,000 people, of whom 88% of people who went to those events said they'd go to a similar event in the future. So I think they've all been very successful. And again, a lot of this we should be thanking the local authorities themselves for the way in which you have all delivered on these events. So things like those local events have been really important. The last couple of slides then, Jana. Finally, a lovely colourful rainbow that you can't possibly read, but I can tell you what it says. So the Inclusive Communities Grants Fund was a really important aspect of this. In fact, we were absolutely panicking. We had £12 million to try and get out the door in small grants to community organisations in a matter of whether it was 19, 20 months. And everybody said there's absolutely no way that you could do this and get it spent and get it monitored and evaluated. We did it, thankfully, due to lots of cooperation with the Heart of England Community Foundation, who are absolutely brilliant partners to work with on this, and also, again, much local authority support and a lot of targeting and a lot of work with voluntary and community organisations to actually identify the projects and provide support to small groups and community groups and whatever to put the applications in. As it happens, we had 1,400 applications and we funded 388 projects. So it shows what demand there is out there. It was so successful that MHCLG put additional funding into it so that because they could see that we could get the money out the door really well. 630,000 people. If you stop and think about that, that is about a quarter of the, or just under a quarter of the population were in some way, shape or form touched by that programme. 1,840 new volunteers, 35,000 volunteering hours, 681 new staff roles were created. Even if they were just fixed term contracts, they were that's how many people were involved. And a lot of the grantees were particularly grateful because although a lot of this was for new activity, we also allowed certain core funded activities to happen. So we actually helped with the kind of resilience of the sector at the same time that they could be able to keep functioning. So that was really important as well. So 1 in 3 grantees used some of their grant to cover day-to-day expenses or the costs of their organisation. And again, this is at a time when, say, Birmingham, for example, was completely slashing their voluntary and community sector budgets. Really, really important that we were able to do that as well. And then the last slide is just in terms of the Community Environment Fund. So we had a special fund for environmental grants, about £1 million, 27 community groups accessed that. And again, we reckon there's about £4.14 social return for every £1 invested. What it meant was that 162,000 people were able now to live within a 15-minute walk of improved blue and green spaces. And this is particularly in the most deprived communities by opening up some of those spaces. So it's very targeted on poorer neighbourhoods where there wasn't access to green space. And we've managed to open up lots of projects that will enable people. So 3,396 people were able to get involved in those activities. 616 walking tours and 375 people attending awareness sessions. So some really, really positive benefits, so people can kind of connect to the environment in a way in which they were not able to before that. So I'll stop there. That gives you a flavour of what's been achieved through the programme. As I say, to deliver it in that short period of time and to be able to demonstrate all these benefits, I think has been a huge success for the region. I'm incredibly grateful, having tracked it from its earliest days, when, as I say, we sat in this room and there was quite a bun fight about it, to actually get to it, deliver so many diverse outcomes across the region, I think is a remarkable success. And we ought to just put on record in particular our thanks to Cat Orchard, who has kind of led this programme from start to finish.
I must admit, I did try to read the papers.
Yeah.
And dry is a bit of an understatement, I think. I found that very helpful because at least it kind of put it in strategic terms. Maybe there's a lesson there for the future, because I think if I'd read that beforehand, I might have had more questions.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, right. Yeah.
But that was a very good and simple presentation. If you have to do the other format, you can bung that on as an appendices. I found really helpful. Councillors, questions? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chair. The ones that volunteered at the games, what wasn't added was the fact that when you volunteer hours when you put on your CV, that also goes towards you getting the job. So it's a case of that. Did those volunteers get any recognition, any paperwork to actually state they'd actually done the volunteering? Because then when they were put on the CV, they can actually put, I got this X, Y, and Z for actually doing it, and that moving forward into getting employment. Thank you.
So I think the very simple answer is yes. United by 22 in particular are absolutely brilliant at the way in which they don't just kind of create volunteering opportunities, but they really see it as an opportunity to actually get alongside, particularly young people, and make sure that they use that volunteering experience to get into employment or get into stay in training or get further training and so on. So if that involves a certificate, then I'm sure that's what they get. But I think it's a lot more than that. I think some of the mentoring and some of the other support they get alongside that is probably more significant than just a certificate. But they've done lots and lots to support people into work.
Just a comment, if I may, and that is that it's remarkable that you got this money out so quickly, you know, and into so many different avenues, which are obviously beneficial for the West Midlands. One thing that strikes me though is, having accepted that we've got this money, 7.2, a 1% administration, you know, 700,000 quid is held back for administration. It's ridiculous, isn't it? They give you the money, they take it off you. And this isn't the first time this has happened. Recently, it's from paperwork. We had a CA grant that went out with a clawback, very similar, where administration costs were clawed back by the CA. This is a habit which I think is wrong, and fundamentally they should have given us the money if they wanted oversight afterwards. Fair enough, come and have a look by all means, but to hold back 700,000 quid was a lot of money.
Just to be really clear about what we're talking about here, there are certain costs that accrue to the combined authority in order to run and deliver the programme. So, for example, but I have to say, we managed to do this with 1.5 staff in the combined authority. That's why I say that we ought to put on record our thanks to Kat in particular, because she basically has run this whole thing. Yeah, I mean, no, she, just to be clear, she's not getting the full admin fee that you're talking about there. But the point I'm trying to make is that we've done it on an absolute shoestring in terms of what we've had to do. What I think you're referring to, which I think is slightly ironic, but I think I kind of understand it, is that DCMS themselves,
7.2.
Yeah, exactly. DCMS themselves have hung on to a certain amount of funding, and they have claimed that they have needed to pay for the costs of various people to man mark us, if you see what I mean. And at times it has felt they've had more people man marking us than we've had people actually delivering the programme on the ground. It is what it is. For a grant programme of this nature, in actual fact, we've kept the admin costs to well below what you might normally expect for this kind of programme. So I think by and large it's landed in a pretty good place. But you're quite right, and I think it's your role as an Overview and Scrutiny Committee to keep holding our feet to the fire as officers, both here and in central government, as to whether or not we've got the adequate resources that we need to deliver these programmes, and whether or not at times we should be diverting more funding into the delivery itself rather than into the kind of core costs. But I think in this case we've done a really good job.
I'm just kind of supplementary on that, because I was going to ask, do we know what the total admin costs were? Because a lot of this money was given to local authorities who no doubt also had admin costs. Do we know what? Do we actually have that information?
Ooh, yes.
I think I don't know is the simple answer to that. I have seen the formal evaluation report, and I have got a feeling that you could potentially calculate it through that report. But I couldn't answer that question off the top of my head, and so I can go away and find out.
That would be great if you could. I noticed we did boot camps in theatre. Now, the government thought boot camps in general terms didn't work very well. Well, they used that excuse to halve funding for them anyway. Can we demonstrate that the people who did the theatre and, sorry, you call it something else, it's arts anyway.
VR, yeah,
VR,
virtual reality.
Yes. Can we actually prove that we got something for that in terms of people in long-term jobs? I know you don't have long-term jobs because people move from contract to contract, but i.e. long-term careers. Is it possible? And you don't have to answer now. We'll be looking at our education, I think, as a special thing later in the year. Yeah. It would be interesting to know how effective that programme was. Is it something we should be repeating using our own money as part of the adult education approach? That's where I'm coming from. So if you could get someone, not immediately, to just see whether we can actually prove it. There were, I don't know, 60 individuals seem to have set themselves up doing whatever it was. I mean, and are still doing it a year later. That kind of analysis.
So happy to take that away
Yeah.
and find out. I think there is an additional evaluation report specifically on those cultural grants, so it might have the information that I can't tell you for certain, but I can go away and find out more as to what's happened. And I guess the point that we need to look at is what are the lessons to be learned for the way in which we spend the AUB going forward. Again, we can make sure that we do that.
I mean, that would be very helpful. And I know it's been a thrust of the combined authority to get more culture and film and arts growth in the economy. And I seem to remember something in the Birmingham Mail about we've now landed Peaky Blinders 2 or something to that effect, which is part of that. Now, I have no doubt that moving into the future, buying of hard items will reduce, and the buying of experiences and consumption of the arts will increase. So I think that is important. So that would be helpful. And I've got one kind of killer question if nobody else has got questions. For £70 million, we could have bought 280 social homes or insulated between 70 and 140,000 houses of that order. Have we actually done a double check on this is the benefits we got from this on something incredibly simple like that? Both of those things being alternative aims of the authority. Would we have done better to actually say, or go and do just one big bang on something? You could buy one housing estate, can you? 280 houses, put people in. There'd be an argument amongst the boroughs about where it should go, of course, but as an intellectual exercise, it might just be worth thinking about, given how short of housing we are.
That was very much the kind of argument that was deployed right at the beginning of the programme. Unfortunately, this funding was through DCMS, and DCMS would not for a moment have entertained us trying to achieve outcomes for other government departments. So you're right to flag it. And again, in the context of what I was describing before about the integrated settlement, even that I don't think is quite as flexible as you're suggesting. But it is, you know, it's the same old problem that I was describing before. There was a limited number of things that we could persuade DCMS to allow us to spend it on. We actually did very well because we were able to spend it on, for example, the economic outcomes that I've described, the global growth programme and so on. And they were prepared to accept that that was legitimate. But I'm afraid spending it on retrofit wouldn't have worked.
Supplementary on that. So did DCMS, when this money was allocated to different organisations, what have you, did they actually do a monitoring sheet with the organisations to actually see what the money had been spent on, getting those invoices and all that together to ensure the money was actually spent on what it was supposed to be spent on? Thank you.
No, we had to do that for them.
Right.
So we had to persuade DCMS at the beginning that we were going to be able to monitor and evaluate the whole programme effectively. And I literally had, Kat's had weekly calls and I've had monthly calls, and, you know, in order to keep persuading DCMS that we are doing the right monitoring and evaluation. And what this report does is set out the kind of final conclusion from that. As I say, there will be an independent evaluation report that will be published very soon, which will set out kind of that independent verification. But DCMS are very happy with the way in which we've gone about it.
Thank you, Ed. So if you could let us have the slides.
Yep.
And when that independent report comes out, I assume this is not going to be a 300-page report. It's going to be something really
Simplified.
I think there will be a shorter version.
If you, I think
It's not 300 pages, don't worry, but it's quite long.
I don't
Use
think
this.
I don't think we need to formally review it, but I think just for
Yeah.
Yeah.
to flick through just to find out, does that independent report, is that the same as what you've told us today, basically? And my assumption is, of course, it will be, but I think in due diligence terms, we ought to just look at it. Thank you. I found that very interesting. So
Yes.
yeah, thank you for that.
I did, yes.
Job rotation model. It's a pity Kathy Bainton isn't here because she was very, very interested in this, but so am I.
Thank you, Chair. So we're going to split this, I suppose, in a little bit into two parts. So I'll just provide a very brief overview in relation to what the job rotation was, what the aspiration was, and what we wanted to achieve. And Ed, who's very much led on the operations of it, will then talk around some of the key activities drawn from the paper and also some of the key learning as well. So we brought the job rotation back in January and start talk about initially what it was about and what it was for. So as a gentle reminder, it was it's a model of employment support that was delivered successfully in Scandinavia to support individuals, support municipals mainly, both in terms of the recruitment of key staff, but also in terms of the upskilling of staff as well. We were really keen to demonstrate to government around our ability to want to bring both employment support and our skills offer together, as well as kind of through identifying this model in Scandinavia, actually got really high conversion rates against things that are being trialled in the UK and hasn't really been trialled fully across the UK as well. And those conversion rates have been around 80% of those individuals who've started the scheme as unemployed have been converted into full-time employment as part of that. So we'd worked with DWP over the course of a period of time for us to access 740,000. So this model was very much unique to us being able to trial in the West Midlands, and the funding was very much around having a look at this model. So the aim of it was around engaging with employers to identify where there were growth opportunities, to align our skills offer to help extract individuals who who they needed to be upskilled to allow that organisation to diversify, whilst then backfilling those vacant roles as individuals were being upskilled with individuals who happen to be currently unemployed. So this is very much creating a employment support ecosystem in terms of bringing individuals who are unemployed into employment, whilst also aligning our skills system of supporting individuals to upskill whilst being employed as well. We trialled it in Coventry because due to Coventry's caseload, in terms of those attending Job Centre Plus, there was a high proportion of those who were basically claimants, but claimants who were in work at the same point. So one of the key elements, say claimants in work, so as part of universal credit, an individual can engage with Job Centre Plus work coach support and still receive universal credit while they happen to be in employment up to a certain income threshold. So there's a large proportion of those within Coventry, which is one of those reasons why we wanted to focus this pilot initially within there. And as I say, the aim of the pilot was to support 80 unemployed individuals and 80 employed individuals to see if we could make to demonstrate that this model works and get some longevity from it. So what I'll do is I'll just yield the floor to Ed just to talk through some of the key activity in the paper and the key learning.
Thank you, John. Delivery time for the job rotation pilot was originally proposed for 2 years. We thought that would be ample time to test out a number of different variables within that. One would be work experience time, for example, taking that up to 6 months where necessary, but also to be able to accommodate higher skills levels of actual employees in the company to go away and upskill at reasonable levels. It's not an excuse. The money is what it is. It's from the Department for Work and Pensions. Despite the request, the answer is no. It's for a year. The delivery time for this was just in the end over 6 months, partly shortened because of a national election and also regional elections. Total figures to date, which are recorded in the paper, are as a result of that 72 people actually onboarded onto the programme for upskilling, and 64, if I remember rightly, for those for work experience placements. Work experience placement time was up to 12 weeks. A reasonable split in the end, I think, between what we would call a large business, large employer in that place, as well as a number of small SME companies who've taken part within it. Coventry City Council have acted as the delivery partner for this, utilising the Coventry Job Shop, as well as their links with existing employers across the sub-region. I think it's fair to say that the outcomes and outputs in relation to SMEs are really encouraging. So if you look at that in a bit more detail, the encouraging signs are that despite the small numbers participating in it, which are literally no more than 2 or 3 in the majority of occasions, all existing staff have been upskilled and have gone on to further higher levels of work, which is great and within the original lines of the pilot. But also, which is fabulous, is the fact that those people who've been taken on universal credit have also secured work with the same employer. And this implies that there is a dedicated resource to both understanding workforce development and also recruitment and selection to unemployed people for their benefit, then I think it starts to tease out a really decent argument for this moving forward. With our large employer, the dividends off that so far have been pretty good, I would argue. The first cohort which ran up until the end of December. We were looking at 28 of those. Presently, we are still tracking, but presently of those, 40% have entered into employment as a result. That, in comparison to average employment support programs, is about the same, but we are very optimistic that that will be superseded. The second tranche, again, would be a number about 22, and we have had to apply to DWP for an extension for those to run those within the same time periods, and that should finish towards the back end of June. It's early days on that, but we are still in communication with Severn Trent in that place. The interesting thing when you start to compare that against other employment support models, and funny enough, skills boot camps, for example, if you look at sector-based work academies, which are essentially a pre-employment program linking unemployed people to a specific program to enter a sector, average length of time is anywhere from between 4 and 6 weeks. Performance varies literally across sector. So some of it is quite low, as in 20 odd percent, to some of it being extraordinarily high, which is encouraging as well, up to about 70%. That means that with this pilot, we are looking at, because it is 100%, and the interesting thing is it's across a number of sectors as well, the potential to roll this out further is quite exciting. And so that is why the report has also referenced our youth trailblazer, for example, where we're also looking for Coventry City Council in particular to start to develop that further and expand and roll that out, and see further learning and understand that in due course. The pilot is also a potential investment for skills activity within investment zones, because it is not only about getting low skilled people into work and the low skill spectrum, it goes far higher than that. And for existing members of staff, the flexibility within it is quite considerable. Particularly with investment zones anyway, I think there's a decent proposal there, for going back to maybe potentially 6 months training time in that space. Anecdotally, our evaluators, PI-TATE, have done an awful lot of work with this, both from a quantitative side as well as a qualitative side, both with employers as well as participants. In addition to that, I was with Severn Trent probably about 6 to 8 weeks ago, and they brought, as part of the meeting, they brought some of the participants from this into it. And I'm not just saying this, and I wasn't suspicious at all, but at the same extent, separately and separately, one was actually going to be taken on employed. The second one was actually leaving the region. And the third one, there was the possibility, for example, of getting a job, providing a few variables need to take place with Severn Trent for that to happen. All three, which has left a smile on my face for a fair time, all three basically saw the benefits of this programme, and in particular, the key learning out of this is the work experience. And when you start to look at young people in the area, one of the big things that drops out, or the lack of, is actually work experience. So there's a real opportunity, both for an employer side, to start to advocate this as a programme that starts to be in that place, but also for young people to come on board with this, as well as adults, obviously, because the key thing with it is, the key variable with this is actually around work experience, being able to do that. And each of those three people at Severn Trent stated separately that, in fact, they felt really, really confident in, even if they weren't going to be engaged with Severn Trent, to actually take that experience and put that elsewhere. So there's a lot to take from this. I think in terms of its potential moving forward. The other thing I would add is that, which is even equally as pleasing, is that the Department of Work and Pensions are also very happy about how it's gone as well. I'm not sure that they'll be advocating that we have any more money for it, which is a shame. But on the other hand, I think if it comes into our domain, that we can add freedoms and flexibilities with it based on the learning that we're taking place, and we wouldn't have be necessarily so time restricted. So that would be my observation of operation. And in terms of governance, we've had quarterly board meetings with Department of Work and Pensions and delivery partners, as well as monthly meetings. And it's actually been a very pleasant experience. What I would say is that I think we also chose to commence this. Obviously, John's referred to the economic, socio-economic factors with Coventry, but we also had a ready-made delivery partner in this place as well, who was able to do that with the support of perhaps ourselves, but also Department of Work and Pension colleagues as well.
A technical question to start with. Where does the money go? Does some of it go to paying wages?
Yes.
That in essence is the cost, is it?
That's right. Yes. Yes.
So for the upskilling,
Yeah.
if there is any formal training as part of the upskilling,
Yes.
the employer pays that, do they?
No,
Or we pay that?
Well, it's a very good point. For clarity, one of the benefits of this. So we had some challenges, I think, with DWP because we have used our adult education budget as part of this, and therefore through the skills analysis with each respective individual and business, it would be Coventry Adult Education, for example, who've supplied that, Coventry College or ITPs, independent training providers, in case. So there's a bit of a brokerage service that goes on with this. But in terms of speed and necessity, Coventry Adult Education Service were the main recipients and providing the majority of that in that place. So you're absolutely right. The money actually goes towards wage support in that place. And maybe there's a bit of cost to compensate the employer to say, well, I'm taking on somebody who is not really productive. I'm well up for this in terms of supporting it, but there's some economic factors in this place. You know, what's in it for me kind of thing. But being very honest, it's not necessarily a bung as such, but it does definitely have rationale around wage support in that place.
So the wage support is for the unemployed person or for the person who's been upskilled or both? Or?
It's for the unemployed person, yeah.
What happens to their universal credit while they're getting that? Is that a top up to their universal credit?
No, it isn't. If it was me coming to you, I would be signing off in that place, and then basically I receive that whilst I'm on the programme, on the job rotation pilot. And then at the end of that time, if I haven't been successful, then I would return to universal credit.
Just to clarify,
Yes.
so this was the pilot.
Yeah.
Is this going to be, you find it's coming and the targets and everything, will this be an ongoing thing that is actually going to be put out to West Midlands, or will there some more funding need to be found to actually do this, or is the funding going to be ongoing to actually facilitate it?
They're really good questions. My present assessment of the situation is that whilst we have our integrated settlement, there are pressures on that all round, as I think we've been alluded to as part of the previous discussions. But where we have additional funding that is reasonably flexible in that place, then we'd be advocating that. and starting to roll that out further. The issue that we've got, I think, is that whilst the findings and the evidence to date are really encouraging and good, it's small beer. And therefore, further piloting of this in an expansion role would need to take place before we could actually go back to government, for example, and say, look, we would like to, we advocate this as being something that we want to adopt across the region. What I would say is everywhere I've taken this, whether it be employment and skills boards as a presentation, to local authorities in the round, with John as a colleague, there is a considerable interest in this as a concept, because it is different. It is different because it not only gets the opportunity for unemployed people to get work experience, it enables in the same space employers to invest in training for existing skill shortages. And that cannot be a bad thing, bearing in mind our productivity overall in the region is not as good as it could be.
Yeah.
So it's great, you know. I would say that because I've been involved with it, but it's been a really good thing to work on, and what we would need to do next, I think, is to start to, you know, pull those papers together, the evidence base, you know, in that space.
Thank you, Chair. So basically, is there going to be any funding to move forward, or have we got to state the case to actually bring the money forward, or could we actually run some of the courses that's been going on around the West Midlands with the funding we've got now, or we are going to have to look for some more funding? Thank you.
So, second phase would be through our Youth Trailblazer, looking at supporting both businesses and young people 18 to 21. Again, that would be in the Coventry local authority sub-region. And then myself and my line manager are also looking at how we might get this into play as part of investment zones and utilising some of the funding that's in there. Caveated in, again, it's in small pockets. But the evidence base from that will then start to increase the argument, providing the dividends of it are similar.
I was going to say, if I can just quickly come in, I think the Trailblazer is a really good example of where there's the art of the policy application to this. So the Trailblazer funding isn't ironically coming in within our single settlement, but it's funding that's been allocated to us as a combined authority for us to begin to think more flexibly around what our young person offer is, or what the young person's guarantee offer is for West Midlands residents. And what we've done is we've worked with local authority colleagues showcasing the job rotation pilot. So within that, there's the flexibility of the funding to be able to apply it, this model or variations of this model, for different local authorities if that's something that they think would be beneficial as well. So we certainly, as Ed's alluded to, I've got to take up with Coventry that they'll be continuing this pilot, utilising that Trailblazer funding. Ironically, the Trailblazer is kind of setting up almost nationally what the youth guarantee should look like. So I'm squeaking as I'm moving away. So ultimately, that will be our opportunity to take that model, take what we do in Trailblazer, to then hopefully influence and change government policy in this area as well.
Brilliant.
When will we be able to do a complete evaluation on this? You said effectively there's a phase 2. I mean, what I would find handy is a one-page chart. Actually, so this is how many people we had.
Yeah.
This is how many have ended up in employment, and I like this concept of splitting it between SMEs and a major employer, because there might be a lesson in there.
Yeah.
We're not sure till we finished it. Is that possible? And if so, when could you do that? Because we are doing a review on the youth trailblazer,
Yes.
and it's November.
Sure. Chair, thank you for that. I would say that we would be in a very good position to provide that information for you by first 2 weeks in July.
That soon.
Yeah.
Right.
Because the majority of the work has been done. All we are waiting for now is for our second tranche to complete with Severn Trent as that large employer. And the extension time given was up to the end of June. So I think it would be, we can provide a considerable amount of information as a result of that.
And I think I got a nod when I said just a one pager, please. I mean, it really is something that is that simple.
Yeah.
I actually said, this is how many starts we've had. This is how many people have ended up in employment. This is how many people have stayed with their employer and have been upskilled.
Yeah.
Because that is the case for doing more, even if it's only another pilot.
Sure.
Because no other authorities seem to be interested in this. I'm not sure it's necessarily for everybody.
No,
It is for Walsall.
And actually having a look at and running some different pilots in different locations, assuming the officers have the capacity locally to handle it, and the employers who'll sign up. Because it is something that's totally new and it might just work. We've got a big, hard to place group of people within the West Midlands. And I think we need a number of different tools. This is not the tool, but it might be one of a suite of tools. And we can compare that, for example, with we do all of this 6-8 weeks skills training. What happens to the people on those? I mean, I visited that construction skills place out near Dickens Heath, and they were claiming 60% success rate for people into jobs. We'll be reviewing that later to find out whether that continues, but this appears to be on par with that kind of level.
Yeah.
And I have heard of schemes that are far less valuable than that. I mean, there is a certain self-fulfilling thing. The people who tend to apply for these things tend to be the people who want to do it.
Yeah.
But okay, let's start with them. Yeah. Any more questions? Councillor Cathal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's go back to the financial and I think I've 7, if we may, towards the bottom where we're looking at the expenditure over up until this March, from last March to this March, and I look at this high-tech consulting. What are they doing there? What are these people actually doing for 127,400? Where are we on this? I mean, are you with me, Mr. Chairman?
Right, I understand the question, and
Well, I'm saying if you want to, if I can help.
no, sorry, if we could, if you could explain what that process is, that would be what we're getting for that. That would be helpful.
What you're getting is essentially an evaluation of the job rotation pilot that was both independent, procured, and also consisted of an evaluation panel of both the Combined Authority and DWP national policy in that place, and it's something that they actually wanted as part and parcel of the pilot. So the sum of money for something that was required, we looked at costings of other similar pilots and models that we've run in the past, and the sum given in that space was that allocation. What I would say is that where we have been able to utilise any underspend anywhere, then we have actually gone back to DWP and said, are we in a position to invest that in the main part of DWP?
So you're, if I may, Mr. Chairman, so you're unable to commit all the fundings within the year, and we've got this variance of 118,000 from Coventry. And we've got a variance with the evaluation Polytech Consulting for 22,000. And on top of the cost of combined authority didn't manage to spend 156 quid apparently. But I know it's silly, but the point is we create a picture here of nothing being straightforward. The money goes out to the council. The CI has 72,000 cost there. Why shouldn't that 72,000 be the evaluating costs? That's where I'm coming from. Are you saying we can't do this in-house?
We could do it in-house, and that would be, we would be in a position to do that potentially if we had to. Currently with our insight team, I think we might be in a position where we'd have to recruit additional staff to do that just because of capacity issues. But I think it comes back to the point before I just made around the requirement was for an evaluation to be done that was independent of the combined authority, hence us actually going out and procuring one.
If I could just, this is a pilot.
Yes.
The money came from the government.
Yes.
They said we want a proper independent evaluation, which means by definition it's done by consultants.
Yes.
If this is successful, we do another pilot and we decide, hang on, no, this is something for the combined authority.
Yeah.
We wouldn't do evaluation like this. We'd need something to check that it was still working, but
Yes.
it wouldn't be done this way.
No, we wouldn't. And I think we have quite enough of our own data and insight within it, both from what the pilot model is indicating in that space, but then also at the same extent, I think is the same with some of our programs around adult education budget. They're evaluated on an ongoing basis in terms of mechanisms and reporting mechanisms. If we really wanted it, you know, sort of like a mirror reflection of it, then we possibly would go out and just say, you know, can you give us an independent view? You know, CITA objectives in that space. Are we on the right lines in terms of what we originally intended, or has it become skewed in some way, shape, or form? A critical eye, maybe. But that would be, you know, something that we would develop along the lines as we moved along.
And if you just, so the other question Councillor Kettle asked was, there's 118,000 underspent by Coventry. Is that why we're extending the programme?
Unfortunately, no.
That's something else.
No, that's something else. So with the original pilot time was from April last year through to March 25, end of. All was going really well. And the anticipation was that we would definitely be able to achieve our outputs and outcomes in that space. I think our timelines have been thwarted by outside variables, one including a national election, one also a regional election in that place. There's been certain standstill periods that we've had to overcome. And as a consequence, it's not necessarily been possible to deliver the total number of outcomes in that place. And the funding that is associated with that has basically not been able to be invested in the pilot as a result.
So that 118,000 hasn't been spent and will never be spent?
No, it's gone back to trade. It's gone back to
the company.
Yeah.
Councillor Kettle is...
That's fine. I'm getting the picture. Thank you very much.
Ed, you had a comment.
Yeah, I think there's a common thread that is kind of weaving its way through the three items that we've looked at this morning. And please don't take this the wrong way. It is absolutely right and appropriate that Overview and Scrutiny Committee should be asking exactly the questions that it's asking. And so I don't want this to sound defensive in any way, but the common thread is that we've had 3 items on the agenda, all of which have been about relatively small amounts of money for relatively short-term periods that are given by government with particular strings attached. The way in which they are given to us means that we have to spend, let's call it, disproportionate amounts of money on independent verification, on other forms of consultancy, simply because there is no other way to deliver them in that time frame other than to use that particular mechanism. And it's a waste of public money, to be frank about it, because we could be building up the capacity of our local authorities to do this, or ourselves to do this. And I think that's really the message that we need to take away from some of this, is just the way in which devolved institutions like the Combined Authority are funded is a really inefficient way of doing it. And this is why we should all continue to bang the drum for proper devolution and for the integrated settlement approach that is being taken. And to be frank, DWP, in the case of this last conversation, are the most resistant to getting involved in the integrated settlement. They want to continue to fund us in this particular way. And it's why it's absolutely great when we get evidence like this, that if we were just given a bit more flexibility to use the funding, we could do it in much more creative ways and deliver much better outcomes. But this is why it's a constant fight.
So within that
questions,
so within that, if we can minute the concern that has been expressed,
Yeah.
that when we get these small grants, we end up spending large amounts of money because we have to on evaluation using consultants.
Yeah.
That this does not appear to be an effective use of public money. Due to the constraints that the government places on the grants. Is it? I've got that right, haven't I?
It's not just evaluation; it's also administration generally. And you know, we have to sit here as combined authority officers justifying some of these things when actually our hands are quite tied on these matters.
London.
Calling London.
No, London's the problem.
London calling it.
London's got the jobs and they've got the money.
So, yes, please go ahead.
I might add, either in defence or otherwise, once the grant agreement was all signed and everything, the first meeting came about, the first question asked to DWP was, can we have an extension? To which the answer was,
No.
Yes, indeed. So it's challenging.
Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chair. Now I'm backtracking a bit with this. It's something else, because I used to work for a housing association, and we used to do getting people back into work, and so I've got quite a bit of knowledge on this sort of thing. Now, these people who actually go into these jobs, will there be someone they can actually go to when the pilot's finished? Will there be someone who's still there to handhold if they actually need the handholding, to actually help them if it's needed, rather than just being dropped into the job? Thank you.
Yes. Part of the criteria as part of that work, that engagement and discussion with employers, was around exactly that, because it is recognised that each new member of staff who's gone through and has been taken on, for example, will still need to be supported in that place and basically be in a position, because they've shown potential. Why, from an employer's side, was the investment of time and effort in that place in the first instance to obviously get that person up to a position of appointment, and then clearly we don't want to let them go, and so it fits into existing infrastructure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we should move on. We're running slightly behind. If there are no further questions. Thank you very much. Very interesting. If you can give us a final evaluation on a single sheet of paper, that would be very, I think, in the form of the table, that would be very helpful. Thank you very much.
There's only 3 of us. Wow.
We're now moving to the Regional Energy Strategy stroke Net Zero 5-year plan. This is the new 5-year plan, yes.
Thank you. So I'll just very briefly summarise the paper, understanding that we are on time. So the request was to return to Overview and Scrutiny Committee following the Combined Authority Board's adoption of the new Regional Energy Strategy in February. So we have obviously not had all that long since February to be delivering on that, but we have been doing a lot of positioning with government. There is an awful lot in that Regional Energy Strategy that sets out changes that we need to the national framework. So we've been positioning a lot with the Clean Power Mission Board, with Chris Stark, with the National Well Fund. It's all about these national structural changes that we need to enable this smarter approach to decarbonisation and managing the energy system that we set out in the strategy. That also leads quite neatly into the second 5-year plan that we'll be developing for net zero. We've done a very speedy internal review rather than going out to external consultants for this review of the first 5-year plan. There will be more detail to follow in the substantive development of the second 5-year plan, but essentially we found that much progress has been made on enabling activity. It's a pattern that is common across the UK local and combined authorities. Found that targets that were set in this first round of climate strategies, net zero targets, there's an awful lot that's been learned in that time, and targets weren't necessarily set aligned to our activities or our spheres of influence. So, for instance, within here, there are some targets on industrial fuel switching for which we don't actually have any data. So there's not really much we can say about that. And so I'd say that this is more a suggestion for how we'll go about developing a second 5-year plan that takes on board these lessons and builds in all of this learning on how we ought to be developing a plan. And so that's taking a much more granular focus as opposed to developing a plan that is essentially a carbon copy of a national net zero strategy and scaling it down. We need a more bottom-up focus, so that will be things like using case studies from our net zero neighbourhoods, using that as a unit of analysis and scaling that out across the West Midlands area to see how we should be staging interventions, where are the strategic opportunities and when in the path to decarbonisation. Making sure that we are aligning with local authority strategies. When the first 5-year plan was adopted, there weren't any. Now there are 6. They're planned in all 7 boroughs, but 6 substantial net zero strategies. We don't want to be encroaching on those. We're not saying that we need to be rewriting those. We're saying that we need to be discussing and working very closely with local authorities to say where is it appropriate for local authorities or the combined authority to be delivering on these, and where are the areas that we can best be enabling local authority delivery. We need to be integrating climate mitigation, preventing further climate change and adaptation, being resilient to climate change that we know is already happening, more extreme weather events. They need much closer integration in this plan, and we're working very closely with the environment team to ensure that we do that. We also need to make sure that we're making the most of combined authorities' functions in this, and so really focusing on our closest sphere of influence. So with all of our delivery programs, ensuring that they are contributing to decarbonisation, when we're building tram extension or when we're looking at bus reform, how we're ensuring that we build in decarbonisation to all of those, as well as the wider influencing that's required to further reaches of the economy. And then finally, making sure that we do have a monitoring framework and we're setting targets and actions that are measurable with data that we do have access to and that reflect what we are capable of influencing, so that we can have a credible pathway to net zero. So I'll stop there. Happy to answer any questions.
When we went through the list on page 83 and 84, I ended up thinking, I'm not actually sure, A, whether these are deliverable, B, whether they're actually the right thing to do. So if you take HGV electrification, the weight of batteries is going to reduce the capacity of HGVs very significantly. And for long distances, that is really troublesome.
Yeah.
And it's not the only route to zero carbon anyway, because my understanding is nationally they're looking at hydrogen combustion engines as trials. Same goes for buses in a way, but there are 500,000 lorries on the road and only 40,000 buses. So are we going to try and rationalise this list down to things that we can really focus on? Because if you say domestic energy, we've done a good job. It's pretty obvious we need to do it. Have we got some money? Yes, we have. Have we got enough? No, we haven't. But it is something we can actually do. So can we get the list down to something that we can actually deliver?
This list it's a result of the process that was undertaken to produce the first 5-year plan. It's a result of the way that carbon reduction potential was modelled, and it's very top down. It's looking at sectors, and then you divide those sectors up into ways that you can calculate a carbon saving over 20 years. That's not necessarily how we should be targeting our interventions, and that's not necessarily what we should be aiming to deliver on. So specifically with the transport ones, with HGVs, there are competing technologies. Electrification has been proving to be quite successful, actually, over the last few years. So you can see it with our buses. We have hydrogen buses and electric bus trials. The electric buses do seem to be performing very well. So the weight issue seems to be receding. But yes, absolutely, this is not the sort of monitoring framework that we'd like to be aiming for. And the next one will have much more specific combined authority actions, potentially areas where local authorities will want to be targeting. Greater Manchester, we have the advantage that they're a year ahead of us in their 5-year plan sequencing. And so they have a monitoring framework, which we've been looking at closely, deciding which bits we like, which bits we don't like. The intention is to bring this through the formal board approvals process to overview and scrutiny later in the year as well. So we would welcome your input on how we design that new framework.
Thank you, Councillor Walton.
Thank you, Chair. Now, as for HGVs having batteries, I think it was in one of these meetings it was mentioned that I think Coventry is using buses with batteries, and what they're actually finding is the road services are degrading a lot quicker than what, because of the weight of the actual batteries. So if we had HGVs that were actually using batteries, the motorways would really suffer. So I think, I know it isn't for the combined authority, it's for the government, but actually looking at that, it's something that really needs to be considered. Is this really energy efficient to actually do that, because of all the road workings that's got to be repaired and all that kind of thing? Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that's exactly why the more holistic place-based view of our analysis this time round will be important, because it's not just looking at these technologies, hydrogen versus electric, in its very limited silo of how many HGVs should we be targeting.
Yeah.
It's looking much more holistically. I think that's really important. And it's also why we're bringing in internal analysts in to do this work as opposed to consultants. I think it will ensure that we're drawing on expertise from across the organisation, so across Transport for West Midlands, as well as the environment team, skills, economy, really ensuring that we bring all those together. We are getting that holistic view.
When I think about HGVs and buses and their weights, I mean, HGV is 44 tonnes, that's it. You put 2 tonnes of batteries in, that's 2 tonnes less load. It doesn't actually do any more damage to the roads as such. And I looked at buses, and a typical bus weight is around 10 to 14 tonnes. If you're sticking a couple of extra tonnes on there, it's nowhere near what HGVs are doing, most of our HGVs. So I do just wonder about this issue about weight. But to have that broader view, I think, is important, as indeed is looking at the particulate emissions. Diesels, there is no doubt, do particulate emissions. Doesn't make any difference where I live, but we have red spots all over the combined authority for high particulate emissions. We saw a report, I think last year, sometime. And so there are dual benefits. And I think trying to get those things, where you can get more than one benefit out of something, is really worthwhile.
And indeed, we've been offered a secondment from University of Birmingham, a researcher there working on the West Midlands Net Zero and West Midlands Air projects, to specifically help us on the analysis of what are the health outcomes that we can achieve here much more holistically than simply reducing carbon. So cost savings, investment in humans, health, all of these things in the round, that'll be essential.
And obviously that goes to domestic insulation as well. I mean, one of the key benefits is you get less mould and you use less fuel, and people are more comfortable and you have better health outcomes. So there are some very good reasons for doing this stuff apart from CO2 reduction. I'm not sure you should cost those things in unless you can get a real number of them, but I mean, they really are benefits. So you are going to look at this more holistically.
Yeah, that's absolutely the intention.
In which case, I can really support that kind of different approach. I think Councillor Kettle, you.
No, it's fine. I'm just making a note of something. I'm thinking.
No, he's just asking if you agree.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. By all means, yes.
Councillor Lloyd, do you have any comments about buses in Coventry?
Hi, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me. I've been having mic issues.
We can now. Thank you.
Fantastic. And so obviously the bus side from Coventry, I think I said it the other week, my big thought and thinking around it is more what complications come on the back. And so it is more down that angle where my head is. And so we know all of the positives, but it's the negatives on it that are just slightly amiss from every report I've ever read. And also apologies for running a tad late and not being in the room today, Chair. Change of sort of council-wise and PAs and everything. I'm all over the place. So total apologies for missing this one.
So I think that's a request that can we look at the downsides as well as the upsides?
Absolutely. So we will also have specific working groups looking at individual technologies where they are most of interest. We've had some work done on heat pump supply chains, for one thing, that looks at these very holistic cost and benefits, making sure that we can drag some of those costs into benefits as supply chains grow, we get greater efficiencies. So yes, absolutely, we'll be looking as holistically as possible.
And we'll be integrating this in with the skills dimension as well.
Yes, we'll be working with stakeholders.
Thank you. Any other comments, councillors? You're okay with that? Yes. Thank you. Well, thank you for your time. So we are now. Yes, so we'll do the work programme. So the latest draft, I think, was on our desks. Any comments on that, or are we willing to recommend this to the first meeting of the new, I was going to call it municipal, it's not the new combined authority year. We spent a lot of time on this only last week, didn't it?
I think Monday.
Yeah.
And we've got 3 potential deep dives at the back. There is some overlapping on, and we'll have to work out how we're going to do that and who's going to staff those. But we can't do that till we know the minutes. So.
God, no.
Yeah. I'm comfortable if there are no comments.
Fine. Absolutely fine, yeah.
I think
that's great.
Thank you.
It is a rolling work programme, so changes can be made during the course of the year. It's not set in stone.
Thank you for that. And we are now moving on to the spatial strategy, are we? Yeah. I suppose we have to do that, yes. So we'll officially close this piece of the meeting and we're going to move on to a briefing on the spatial strategy. And I'm told